who was responsible for making the Exorcist, the movie, and he wanted Peter to do some kind of treatment, a screenplay for something. Pete used the opportunity to basically leave the band, and then when Friedkin found out that that's what Pete had done, Friedkin freaked and said, "Oh, I don't want to break up the band." And I think it became too hot a potato for him politically, and so suddenly we'd been talking about what are we going to do now that Pete's left? Who's going to sing? And nobody at that point thought that Phil Collins was going to step into his shoes. But luckily, Pete said, "No, I can do the album with you. I can." Ideally, he wanted to take time off because his wife's pregnancy was complicated. So he was experiencing personal pressures that the rest of us didn't really have at that time. Although we were all starting to have children, become fathers, and the complications of all of that. But he said, "Look, I'll do the album, and I'll fulfill all the gig commitments." It turned into a double album. It took forever, and the touring took about 9 months. Nobody wanted to let him go, so more and more dates were added. Masses and masses of shows, both in the States and in Canada, and throughout Europe, of course. So it was an extraordinary time, but always under this kind of the sword of Damocles, which was that our lead singer was going to go, and I tried to convince Pete to stay because I loved him, and but I think he just had enough of band politics by that point, and he ostensibly wanted to do something else for a living. Whatever that was, I don't know, but I think having had a short hiatus, he decided that music really was where he should be headed in future, and formed a team that included Bob Ezrin as producer, and Tony Levin on bass, and Robert Fripp, who was functioning, I think, as musical director for him at that point. And so, and that produced Pete's first hit single, which was Salisbury Hill. Although I think it probably gets played more now than it did back then, as his stature grew. So I couldn't tell you whether first time round that was the huge hit that it seems to be in retrospect. Beautiful tune. I got to play it with him live at a charity event some years down the line, and another proud moment.
Certainly. Well, a couple more albums, A Trick of the Tail and Wind and Weathering, and it was time for you to leave. When did you feel, or what was your feeling that it was time to chart your own course?
Well, I think the fact that Pete was going to leave meant that nobody knew where the band was headed. And at that point, sometimes the keys to the songwriting cabinet were very closely guarded, and I never really had any guarantees of my songs getting done, although sometimes I did get whole songs done, like Blood on the Rooftops and Entangled, and Can Utility and the Coastliners, and Horizons, and various things. But in the main, basically, I said I'm going to do a solo thing. Mike Rutherford and Phil Collins joined me on it, and they were the rhythm section. And then having done that, and the album having taken off, I think to everyone's surprise, the fact that it was so well received, then I think Mike was critical of me, and I think wound up Tony and said, having helped me make the album, he criticized me for having done it at the same time, and unfortunately, it meant that it really sort of soured the working relationship within the band for me, and I felt that I'd evolved to the level of solo performer. And even though I thought that Genesis was the best band in the world, the best team of writers working together, unfortunately, that level of competitiveness worked in its disfavor, if there's such a word. We'd already lost Peter Gabriel. I was to leave, and because I was forbidden from doing any more solo projects, and a band that was capable of hemorrhaging band members like that had to eventually allow the idea of people doing solo projects. And of course, Phil had his own band at that time as well, which was Brand X. So it seems as if it was a case of do as I say rather than as I do, and I think that I made the right choice. Doesn't mean to say I don't love the material. I do. I still love the material. I still love the guys, and think that it was, as a team, unparalleled in terms of individual songwriting talent. But nonetheless, when it comes down to self-respect, or the idea of you might potentially have stillborn brain children, not to stress the point too much, I felt I had to have that outlet in order to have, not just self-respect, but to see what might happen and to work with other people.
Certainly, and then you embarked on an amazing run of solo albums, which brings us to the live tour of Selling England by the Pound and Spectral Mornings. Live at the Hammersmith. What are your great memories? Why was that the performance that you knew was going to be the best to record? Well,
it's an iconic London venue. In my time, I've played masses of them. Earl's Court, Wembley, the Royal Albert Hall, but there's something about Hammersmith Odeon. It's right in the centre of London. It's right where the subway is, where the tube is. It's very easy to get to. It's West London. It's got such a history. Played there many times with Genesis and under my own name. Seen many, many bands there. Basically, Inside Out said to me, we need to record each time you do a world tour. We need to focus on something that the last one had been the Palladium show with an orchestra, and I thought, if I do this show which features several favorite albums, fan favorites, we can go for this grand slam thing, bring as many rabbits out of the hat as possible, do these two favorite albums, and Hammersmith happens to be a great venue. I think the last time I went was to see one version of Yes, the one with John Anderson and Trevor Rabin and Rick Wakeman, and it was great. It's always a great venue. Great to see people. Great to see Lee Pomeroy playing bass with them too, my pal. We worked together on many things, and so that's it. And it's a great sounding album. It's got a surround sound mix by Stephen Wilson, an extraordinary stereo mix by Roger King. It sounds really great. It sounds really fresh. It sounds like it was that stuff was just written yesterday, and the band played such great versions of things, like some of the new stuff, like Under the Eye of the Sun. They just play the balls off it, and they're extraordinary. Just the rhythm sections alone, of Craig Blundell and Jonas Reingold. Just the rhythm section alone are absolutely mighty.
Yes, indeed. And put a cherry on top, you were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2010 with the members of Genesis. What was it like to reunite with the boys and receive such a glorious honor?
Very, very interesting. I think it was a great evening. It's extraordinary to be there being inducted whilst you're rubbing shoulders with ABBA and Oh my God! There were masses of people that night. It was like the Oscars. It was extraordinary. It started off. Let's put it this way. Most people are wearing penguin suits, although I refuse to do that. I thought I'm just going to come as myself. It started off very stiff and formal the whole evening, and then as it got going, the whole thing, there were more and more speeches and plaudits and everything, and it became more and more emotional as people started to loosen up. People had a few drinks, people started dancing. It was extraordinary. And the other thing is to see people being celebrated, writers, many of whom had passed on, and we've just left with the legacy of those simple, sweet songs that we grew up listening to. It's a bit like the whole of your childhood going past, and it really was a great evening. So, yes, it became a very emotional evening, and I felt very honoured to be part of it.
Well, you certainly are carrying on that great tradition with the live selling England by the pound. And
oh, that's great fun. Love doing it.
Yeah, all your great music. Now, I know times have changed radically, but still, there's young creative people every day picking up the guitar and, want to be the next Steve Hackett or Steve Howe or, Eric Clapton. What advice do you give to them to put them on a course? Because there is no instant success, and certainly you paid millions of hours of dues. What do you impart to them to help them?
Well, I would say that there's only one way it's going to work for anybody, and I don't even think it's a lesson that can be taught, but you have to be absolutely mad keen. You have to love it. So if you love it, if you love doing it, I think that all things will fall into place, but you have to have the love of it first of all, and I don't think that can be taught. It's either in the blood or not, but I do believe it's possible to be every bit as good, if not better, than all of your heroes. It happens by degrees, but you have to be dedicated to it.
Absolutely. Perseverance. Absolutely. Well, our special guest has been Steve Hackett, of course, of Genesis fame. Please check out the live album, Selling England by the Pound, and Spectral Mornings, and, of course, all his new stuff, At the Edge of Light, and all the great music that Steve puts out. Best of luck to you in keeping all your music alive and well, and we look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks so much, Jay. All the best to everybody. Thank you.